I don't know if I'm live or not. I think we live.
We are live.
I think we live. I think I see myself on TV. Mama, I see myself on TV. I see myself on TV. I can't sit back too much and try to get comfortable. But you can hear me okay.
Yes.
Hi. I want to show you something that's on my TV. I push pause real quick. I'm going to see if it'll show up. Hold on. It's trying to zoom. It's trying to focus. Come on, zoom in. Zoom in. Maybe it's too much light. Come on. Damn it. Dang it. I'm sorry. Excuse my French. Anyhow, dang it. Why won't zoom in? Do I have to like move the camera closer? Well, did you see what George Bush? I was about to call that man George Bush. Did you see what? Did you see what Joe Biden said?
I haven't seen what he said, no.
You just got off from work. Okay, so I was done working, Marcy, right? I had like taken off. I had this wonderful conference on ACEs today. We got a couple people that's watching. I can't tell who's watching. But hey, y'all, this is like Marcy and Cindy. We just wanted to talk about George Floyd and this verdict and ACEs and what all of that got to do with stuff. So anyhow, Marcy, I purposely have not been watching the trial. I purposely have not been watching the George Floyd trial because I feel like the media sometimes, I ain't going to say sometimes, I'm just going to be straight up.
Mm-hmm.
The media puts stuff out there that desensitizes us, makes it normal for us to see stuff like we've been seeing. So when this verdict came in, Kendrick come out all the time. What's up, Ken Fulton? So if you want to come in and chime in, we just talking about George Floyd. This was not a scheduled broadcast. I was in a mood. So tell me if you want to come in and I'll message you. But anyhow, so Biden gets on TV and he goes, "We can't let Floyd's last words die within." I believe his last words was something like, "Mr. I can't breathe, mama." And he called out to his mama at some point, right? So I was over here, Marcy. Ken told me he can't. You need to work out. You need to be working out over here, spreading the word about ACEs, Ken, and tell people about it. So I started to like watch the news a little bit, and I grabbed my little whiteboard, and I was like, I wonder what was up with George Floyd's childhood, because I ain't gonna say the media. Depending on what media you watch, right? But some of the media, and I know the defense team or whatever was trying to say that George Floyd's drug problem is what caused him to die, right? And so I do need to go on record and say I ain't watched the trial. I caught a couple of headlines, but one of the headlines I know that stuck out was they was trying to accuse George Floyd of, being addicted to opioids, and that was really what caused his death. So that led me to like want to figure out like, well, where did his, drug problem start? Because before we get too lost in the fact that somebody is being charged with his murder who rightfully should be charged with his murder, I wanted to understand what gave them the audacity to try to bring up this man's drug use as a reason for killing him on a street corner. That is a horrible ASS way to die.
Mm-hmm.
So anyhow, I started Googling and I found a couple of people that had done some interviews with George's childhood friends, and they had pulled up a couple of things that they had found out about George Floyd and like where he grew up. And what's interesting, what George Floyd and I share in common, is that we both lived in Third Ward at some point in our life. George Floyd lived in Third Ward when he was a little kid, and I lived in Third Ward when I went to Texas Southern University. So I know exactly what some of the people were talking about that are from that area. But anyhow, so Marcy, what I pulled up on George Floyd's childhood history. The only two ACEs that I could confirm based on what people had pulled up with his biography, the one ace that they said, well, they don't, of course, they don't call them aces, but one of the interviews said that at 2 years old, George Floyd's mom and George Floyd's dad separated. And so what we know about aces is that would fall in household dysfunction. He was 2 years old. He probably didn't understand that. Mm-hmm. So George Floyd's mom decided to relocate to Houston, right? And George Floyd was the oldest child. So again, George Floyd's mom passed away a couple years before he did. So I really don't know outside of what I read from the interviews from the journalists. But the first ace was his mom and dad separated. So that had an impact on George. And then the second confirmed ace is going to fall under the bucket of neglect. Not saying his mama purposely neglected him, mm-hmm. but the neglect ace came from the interview said that they lived in poverty. She had 4 kids and she was a single mom. So those two aces, but here are the biggest aces, which is why I was like, I'm going to talk about this because this ended up becoming a community issue. And before we celebrate the verdict too much, let's figure out what in the world caused George Floyd to become addicted to a substance that would later be used against him to justify why somebody could murder him. Right?
Mm-hmm. Can I ask a quick question?
I just talk because I'm just talking, yeah. But it's
Did he have, or do you know if he had a relationship with his father?
Well, I could not determine that from what I Googled. I could not determine whether or not he had a relationship with his father, but I can tell you he had a relationship with the streets. And here's how I know. The streets looked up to him because he was like this big guy, right? Like they say, he just kind of blossomed at an early age. So what I pulled up on George Floyd, and I'm pulling out my teacher board, right? Here go my teacher board. Where's my camera at? One of the articles talked about George Floyd's neighborhood, and it really zeroed in on George Floyd's neighborhood. And check this out. This part was an original part of the study of ACEs, but there's a lot of additional studies that have been done that talked about communities, and when communities are, in George Floyd's case, stricken with violence. So it talked about how he grew up in a neighborhood where there was a lot of violence, physical violence done to each other, and obviously murders. Another journalist talked about what George Floyd said when he was out trying to mentor kids, because he did get out of prison. They say he spent about a fourth of his life, his adult life, in prison. But when he got out, they said he did try to go in and like do mentoring of a few youth, right? Mm-hmm. But anyhow, as a child, here are the 4 things that would be associated with adverse events for children. Thing number 1 was the neighborhood violence. Thing number 2 was in his neighborhood, for the few adults that he had in his life that he looked up to, he witnessed, wait for it, mass incarceration. So all of the people that he looked up to, regardless of what they chose, to do for their income, obviously, they talked about drug dealers were kind of like the people they idolized in that neighborhood. Sadly, what happens to drug dealers is they get incarcerated. So now all of a sudden, the people that George Floyd was looking up to were being incarcerated by the dozens. The third thing that came up that is not necessarily an ace in the original study, but definitely does contribute to it, was that he went to a school. The schools that he went to were not very strong academically. So now he's not even getting the education that he needs to learn how to handle this situation that he was born into, which happens to be the poverty situation. And, obviously trying to figure out how to help his single mom as the oldest kid. And then the fourth thing, which is so crazy that this ends up being the way that he leaves Earth, but as a child, he witnessed a lot of police brutality. One article said that they found themselves constantly running from police because they were racially targeted, and that they saw a lot of people in their neighborhood being targeted by police officers just because of their skin color. Now, of course, with George Floyd, he was a big kid, so he can't really hide much because you big, you black, and you in the hood. He was gonna be targeted more. So the reason why I thought was like, you know what, they tried to use his drug problem as a reason for somebody to put their knee on his neck and kill him on a street corner. And I said, in this situation, that police officer, he didn't really care what happened in George Floyd's past. And I'm speaking out of turn. I'm sure I'm speaking out of turn. But the fact that on record, I know that George Floyd had 2 confirmed adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, right? But I'm going to guess that with his mom, an article that was written quoted his mom that said that she really hoped that George Floyd would be the one who would get her family out of poverty because of his size and because of his potential with athletics. One article quoted her saying that, she really felt like George was going to be the one to get them out of poverty. So I'm going to go out here on the limb, Marcy. You could go ahead and say, Cindy, don't say that. But I'm going to go out here on the limb and say, if George Floyd's mom did say that, God rest her soul, she passed away. But if she did say that, something leads me to believe she might have been under some stress living in the hood, trying to raise 4 kids by herself. I'm going to go out on the limb and say that, because it did say that George Floyd got picked on a lot because they was broke, basically. So he didn't have clean clothes and all that. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say, if George Floyd's mom was living in poverty, trying to raise 4 kids, she might have been depressed. I don't know that for a fact because the lady's not here to speak. But if she was, that means if she was depressed or she was in a situation where she couldn't take care of her kids or didn't feel like she could give them everything that they needed, that probably meant she could not be there emotionally for her kids because nobody was, I'm guessing, right? So if that was the case, then that means that was another ace that George collected. But here we go. You know the data. I want people, you know the data. Here's 2 numbers I said when I was on live earlier, but my phone was on mute, so it didn't catch anything. So it was like my practice. I told people to remember these 2 numbers, the number 4 and the number 5. Camera, the number 4 and the number 5. Remember those 2 numbers. Children with an ACE score of 4 and higher are 5 times more likely to develop a substance abuse problem. So what? He had a drug abuse problem. So what? Why should we care? In your opinion, why should we care? What is ACEs and his drug abuse problem got to do with anything? In your opinion?
Well, number one, I want to know how many people have an opioid addiction in the United States.
A whole bunch. Don't even quote me on that number.
So
we just
many.
know it's a lot. What's up,
Poverty
Shamara?
stricken, wealthy, it doesn't matter. It's all over. So there's that. Number 2, it doesn't say anything about his father, so I'm assuming his father wasn't really in the picture. Again, we're just speculating here, but yeah, experience and speaking to people and life in general. He was the oldest and he was the man. So mom left and moved away from dad. Then George had to become the man of the house.
Yeah. So he took on an adult role.
That put a lot of pressure on him. And he didn't want that pressure. He didn't need that pressure. He was a child, so his childhood was stolen from him. He's on the streets. There's lots of gang violence. Tried lots of things to make money, a rapper, other things. He was a nightclub, but he was also known as someone that would protect, someone who worked for the homeless, delivered meals, tried to lift everybody up, they said, in the neighborhood. So with what you said, his mother put a pressure on him that was not attainable considering the childhood that he had. Yeah. And it's more than just neglect that the mom put on him. I'm assuming dad's not there. There's an abandonment issue. So you're constantly trying to that validation. I think he was good at sports, made it to Texas State, some hope there. Probably constantly seeking validation from the father that wasn't in the picture. Yeah. Here nor there, everybody has we all have trauma we're waking up to find, it doesn't matter age, race, religion. Why is this information pertinent? Why is that what his children need to hear to further the trauma?
Can I ask something? I'm glad you brought that up. Everybody has trauma or drama. In our neighborhood, we call it drama, right? I'm going to tell you what the research says. Hey, Shamara. I do. Shamara wants to know what was the sickness of Chauvin, Derek, that killed him. Boy, if I look up Derek's childhood, I know he got some aces. Here's why I wanted to bring this to the table about George Floyd's drug abuse problem and how his drug abuse problem became the defense's number one strategy to make this man look bad, right? You talked about everybody has trauma. All right, we get that. Sometimes we just go through stuff that as kids we shouldn't see, whatever, but it happens, right? What George went through, experienced as a child, wait for it. Oh my goodness, this is so hard to say. Woo! I gotta bring it to me because I think about what I inflicted on my own child and I didn't even know. But what George Floyd had to experience as a child changed the way he would function as an adult. Like you said, all of us at some point probably went through something, right? The more aces, like I said, 4 and 5, you got 4 more aces, you're 5 times more likely to be addicted to a substance if nobody intervenes. But I bring up George Floyd's aces because the more aces you have, the harder it will be for you to handle life stress as an adult. Now, one of the things his girlfriend said that she went on record and said that when George Floyd's mom passed away, hi Abdur, hi Shamara again. When George Floyd's mom passed away 2 years ago, she said George took it hard. Like he started relying on that substance a little bit more because he did not know how to handle mom's death, right? So I'm assuming he had an emotional attachment that was very, very, she was his go-to person. She was the last person he cried out for before he passed away, right? So what we all know, which is why I titled it, Aces, Taxes, and Death. In life, 2 things are guaranteed. We know for sure. Taxes and death. We all know that those are the 2 things. If you work, you're going to pay taxes. And if you grew up like we grew up, you're probably going to experience no, I take that back. Taxes and death. I'm going to get this right? Like we all know we have a start date and an end date, right? So the fact that George's mom passed away, and death is something we expect, right? We all are going to experience it. We all have experienced it at some point. What George's aces did for him was said, when your mama died, you ain't going to know how to handle it. You know why you're not going to know how to handle it? Because all those aces you accumulated, all those aces made it to where you do not know how to handle your stress. So you are going to go to a substance to soothe your pain. You want to bet? The higher your ACE score, without intervention, you're going to rely on a substance or some other thing to handle a normal stressor. Death is a normal stressor for all of us. Why is it that he spiraled down more when his mom died and he turned to that substance more? And that same substance would be the excuse that the defense used to make this man look bad. When it was his community, it was his environment that helped him accumulate those aces.
Absolutely. It's not just him and his mother. I'm going to go out on a really long limb here because I've seen this before. And Shannon, on your Thursday night show, might be able to shed a little light into this. And those boys that didn't get to be boys, their children, the other brothers and sisters are going to school, but that older boy had to take that role of kind of like the father. the mother and the son usually have a trauma bond.
Yep. A
It's
trauma
not,
bond.
and these are not bad things, necessarily per se, but their relationship was not mother and son. In some ways, he became spouse, he became caregiver, he became income supporter. And when those two relationships are formed like that, once the mother dies, the man, the boy, the child usually becomes worse. That's statistical information.
Wow.
Because they are so attached to that person. They say usually it's a love-hate relationship, because he had to be a provider. And that his childhood was stolen from him. And I wouldn't be surprised if
Ooh. Okay. Shamara asked earlier about this show, Derek Chauvin. I'm probably mispronouncing his name, but I don't know how accurate this article is, but I Googled because, people who hurt other people. Hurt people hurt people. We've heard that all the time, right? And then if you've seen that video multiple times, you can see there's a little bit of hurt in that cop's eyes who just had no affect whatsoever as he kneeled on this man's neck. There's an article on here that says, oh, and again, I'm literally quoting the article. This is not from me at all. I did one research and this is what popped up. So obviously do your own research to find out whether this is true or not. But it said that the cop, in his childhood, he had a scary childhood. Here we go. God, I really hope this is true before I put this out here about this man. It says he killed a cat by struggling it when he was a kid. So it looked like he had a thing against animals. So he started taking his anger out on animals. I really want to know what his childhood like.
His ACEs, I believe, are really high. I mean, they said that.
He's got to have some high ACEs to treat somebody like that. It's the only that's the only way.
And the problem with that is that usually doesn't get triggered until you're an adult, which is why it's so important, the work that you're doing. Because law enforcement needs to be screened for this.
They do, because they're going to be taking it out on people.
Yes, because
they're going to be taking their anger out on people.
He could have been pissed off at his wife, for all we know, and decided to, channel it all there. Just like we are upset as adults, we don't know where to channel, and our kid's going to get the lash out, because it's the closest person or the one that's sitting there bugging you at the moment. You're just, It's so.
Dang, I wish I could find more about his, what was he like as a kid? Let me see what this one said. Anyhow,
I believe he's been reprimanded several times by the police force.
Yeah.
Why isn't that?
It's sad, but I think I ain't gonna keep people on here long. But I wanted to say, yeah, we can celebrate this win that it feels like justice has been served, right? Like, he clearly murdered the man. Like, there was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The defense swung for the fences, tried to bring up his drug abuse problem. And I would say, when I think about helping and trying to work with communities with this whole idea of ACEs matter and people like Black Lives Matter, if they do, we got to start at the source. The fact that George Floyd went from being a prospective professional football player, he had a dream when he was in second grade, he wanted to become a U.S. Supreme Court judge. Somebody wrote about him. So George Floyd was a child with dreams. He was a child that saw no limits to to what he could accomplish regardless of his neighborhood. This kid in the second grade, which would make him how old would he be? Let's see, 6 is kindergarten, 7, maybe 7 or 8 years old, give or take. This kid had a dream to become a U.S. Supreme Court judge, not just a traffic ticket judge. This kid had some big dreams, and because of his size, so many other doors opened up for him, especially in the arena of sports. And because of the neighborhood he was in, because of the community that he was in. Uh-oh, is that me? The echo? Oh, somebody said, I will not be satisfied with one conviction. And we should not be satisfied with one conviction. We have to take our child's upbringing into our own hands, and we have to I'm gonna make up a word right now. We have to de-idolize drug dealers.
Mm-hmm.
We have to stop fantasizing about somebody's money is long because they poison our community with these drugs. These drug dealers are becoming famous, which is what George Floyd unfortunately was exposed to growing up, and those became his heroes, who later end up, like I said earlier, being incarcerated by the dozens, right? George Floyd has so much potential, but he did not have a healthy community to help him realize his potential. So what did his ACEs turn him into?
Another statistic.
His ACEs confirmed what the statistics have already written about us. Mm-hmm. His ACEs confirmed what they said would happen to him. Remember, I said 4 and 5, those two numbers. Having 4 or more ACEs means you are 5 times more likely to be addicted to a drug or alcohol or just abuse a substance. The fact that George Floyd had ACEs inflicted on him just because of, his shortcomings of not being financially stable enough to be in a safer neighborhood, in a neighborhood that provided better schooling. Unfortunately, the depths of those closed-in walls, if you will, took George Floyd from being able to reach his full potential, which, whether it was a Supreme Court judge or whether it was getting into sports because of obviously his talent. And this man ended up spending a fourth of his adult life incarcerated. Mm-hmm. All because of his ACEs. Shamara, what you want to say to Shamara? Shamara says he was stamped from the beginning. Hashtag stamped from the beginning. That's a book that we read. Hashtag stamped from the beginning. Last thing. George told his girlfriend, or his girlfriend shared at some point during the trial, that George suffered from, you ready? He suffered from hypertension. I think that's high blood pressure, ain't it?
Mm-hmm.
All right. He suffered from the D, depression. He suffered from claustrophobia. Oh, I'd love to know a little bit more about where that came from. And she closed out by saying he was unable to deal with his mom's death. Guess what? If we picked up a couple of manuscripts or even Googled the word adverse childhood experiences, we could take some of those things out that say he or she, and we could put Derek's name in there. Because he is the he and she that ACEs are writing about. And they ain't never even met. They didn't even know George Floyd until all this happened. But he or she is what they write about. If we, as a community, do not come together and stop memorializing drug dealers and stop memorializing drug use and stop, I don't know. I came from it, and and it was just what we did. Like they were our local celebrities, right?
But that's the thing. The government, the celebrities, everybody has this addiction. Not everybody. A lot of people. We know this is an issue. This is why people are being abused. This is why people are abusing. This is why people are dying. This is why children are being raised with ACEs being inflicted on them, and the parents don't even know because they are numb because of this. But our government, why are we not more concerned about why the hell can't we stop the opioid addiction? We could stop street drugs if we wanted to.
Oh, yeah.
All this talk about guns, but let's look at who is the real villain when it comes to prescription or street drugs? Why do we have to paint George Floyd out to be that just because we don't want to take responsibility for something that happened? That's what it boils down. We sit here all the time. We have to take responsibility for what we've gone through and our healing process without blaming other people, without being mad, with our depression, with the betrayals, with the deceit, with the hurt. This man had to do it on camera and lose his life.
What a horrible way to die. What a horrible way to die.
With that in itself, I feel, is petty and bullying and is not responsible on the part of our media, other people. I saw something the other day that said, we've got to stop pulling people out of the river and find out why they're falling in. We know good and well why they're falling in. And nobody really gives a crap at the end of the day.
It ain't our problem. You wanna hear this reach? Watch this reach. Watch this reach. We're going to allow you to marinate in this community, this situation, this thing that is going to make you sick. And we're going to even give it a professional name, and we're going to call it ACEs. So you're going to be born into this thing. Listen, you're going to be born into this thing that is going to make you really sick later on. This thing is poverty. This thing is single parents. This thing is absent fathers. This thing is incarceration. This thing is substance abuse. These things, you're going to be born into them. But wait, if you live long enough, we're going to sell you the cure for that thing we put you in. So we not only put you in that thing, but we sell you the cure for it. So you got depression or claustrophobia, George, or maybe hypertension is what you're dealing with. Okay, so you say you need some pain medicines? Okay, we're going to go ahead and write you a script for that. And we're going to tell you that you got be careful because you might get addicted to it. But if you knew my ACE score, you would have looked at something to give me, because my ACE score says that if I take this drug, I'm probably going to get addicted to it. So that's the best you can offer me for my blood pressure or for my claustrophobia or for my depression, for this pain. So the fact that these two systems are not even working together, you make me sick and then you sell me the cure. It just doesn't add up. It just doesn't add up. You make me sick and then you sell me the cure. That same cure that would later be the reason why a police officer said that he had to hold me down because I was under the influence. It just doesn't add up. It just doesn't add up. If you knew my ACE score, you would not have prescribed me those drugs in the first place. And I think there was some point where he was getting them illegally, according to what his girlfriend said, because they just needed them. But at some point, somebody was prescribing them either intentionally or unintentionally. But if they knew the stress that his body had already been under, prescribing him a drug that would later be the reason why somebody killed him, somebody would have thought twice about that. So the same people that make us sick also sell us the cure.
Did the cop who killed him know he had a opioid addiction?
Yeah, he did, because he had some interactions with him in before, so he knew. He knew, right?
So that's a reason to kill a person?
No, it's not a reason to kill a person. Obviously, he was clearly in the wrong, but I guess because we do work with adverse childhood experiences, like we're supposed to be the prevention, right? Let's do things in our community that help people like George Floyd not rely on a substance to deal with everyday life stressors, right? Because the more we rely on a substance to deal with everyday life stressors, and again, I'm not a medical person, I read and I paraphrase what I learned, but the more we don't understand what these drugs will do to a body of a person that has already lived in a very toxic, stressful situation, we would be less likely to default to gravitating towards these things where we don't know how our particular body is going to respond to it. Everybody's body is going to respond differently. Everybody's going to handle stress differently. But one thing's for sure, 4 and 5, if you got 4 or more ACEs, you are 5 times more likely to become addicted to whatever that substance is, meaning that whenever you run into a situation where you ain't got enough money to pay your bills, you're going to run to that substance to help you get your mind off of it. But that bill going to still be there tomorrow. Mm-hmm. 4 and 5, if you got 4 or more ACEs, you are 5 times more likely to get addicted to a substance. So the next time you and your man get into it, or you find out that he's cheating, or vice versa, and you don't know how to deal with the situation and your body is just pissed off, you're going to run to a substance that helps you forget about what happened. So 4 and 5, I think that's the big thing, 4 and 5. So if your kid is in a situation where you have unintentionally placed ACEs on them, like I did, I know because of my unintentional infliction of ACEs on my daughter, that if she did try a drug or she tried alcohol, the chances of her becoming addicted to it are 5 times more than somebody who didn't have any ACEs.
And even more if your parent was, so if George's mom had that, or George's dad, even if he wasn't in relation with his dad, he is still likely to become that. So it could have been, you got to stop looking at your family tree as this is mom, dad, and say, there's an issue here, not to blame and not to take away from the situation. But if we would have known that, then we wouldn't have been prescribed this medication because your mother or father, may have had that.
Right. We don't know how our bodies are going to respond to it. We don't. But loud and clear, we are the research that they're writing about, and they ain't never even met us. We are the research that they are writing about, and they've never met us. They are writing about you and I, and they have never met. How you gonna tell my story before me? It's kind of how I look at it. Like, anyhow, rest in heaven, George Floyd. Rest in peace, George Floyd and his mom, and just pray for all the people that have been affected by this experience. And how does the scripture go? For those that have an ear, let them hear. Do you remember that one? That's one I like it so much, but I don't know why I can't get it right. What is it? If you have an ear, hear.
Yeah, for those who have an ear, let them hear.
What verse is it? I'm about to look it up. Hold on. He who has ears, let him hear. Matthew 12:15. I know my Shamara is going to quote me. She's going to be like, you need to get your scripture right if you're going to use it. He who has ears, let them hear. Matthew 11:15. I'm new to the Bible. I'm not good at memorizing stuff, but he who has ears, let them hear. We are done with the finger pointing. We are not the enemy. We're just trying to say that, well, I'm trying to say, I don't want to speak for you, Marcy. So he who has ears, let them hear. We are not the enemy. We do know that this fancy thing that they've coined as adverse childhood experiences, the more of those that you have, the harder regular life stressors are going to be for you as an adult. If you don't get help, if there's not an intervention. The more ACEs you have as a child, the harder it will be for you to handle stress as an adult.
Preventing ACEs would drop the rate of depression by 44%.
44%.
44%.
That's almost half.
With the score of 4 or more, the likelihood of attempted suicide goes up to 1,200%.
1,200, not 12, but 1,200.
1,200%. And I don't know. I don't know George Floyd, and I stopped watching TV 6 years ago. But I guarantee you had more than two aces.
Oh, I guarantee you he had more than two. Trust
And
me. I guarantee you.
claustrophobia,
Yeah.
he was bullied and abused
Yep.
and
Yep.
prevented early from being who he was supposed to be.
Yep. So if parents and communities, if parents and communities care, this would be the last thing I would want to say about that, Marcy. Healthy communities contribute to healthy households. Healthy households contribute to healthy kids. Watch this chain reaction. Healthy kids contribute to healthy schools. Healthy schools will then help cement a healthy child. Where George Floyd came from was an unhealthy community, an unhealthy home by way of just financial and absence of resources. I can't speak for what his mom went through, but I know he was in an unhealthy community. He was in an unhealthy zip code, the unhealthy zip code, and an unhealthy home. And then, according to the school he went to, which I can vouch for this, he went to an unhealthy school. From an unhealthy school, he turned into an unhealthy kid that turned to drugs to deal with everything that he was seeing in his environment. And where did that lead him to? An unhealthy prison. After leaving that unhealthy prison, he was then, years later, his life was in the hands of an unhealthy, mentally police officer.
I know you want to get off of here, but I want to ask this question. How do you have established and deem a healthy community?
Well, how do you establish an unhealthy community?
How? Because his mom probably didn't live the way she wanted to. She didn't want to have to put that. They were. It's survival of the fittest. We're just surviving, a lot of us.
A lot of it's surviving, and chances are she probably came from aces. I know she did, because one article talked about her ancestry just in general. So she came from a family of unfortunate situations. If there was a magic wand to fix this, Marcy, and I'm about to go out here. I'm about to go out here for real. If there was a magic wand to fix this, and to start at a community level, it's some drug dealers that's just got to take a L.
Thank you. I'm
drug
sorry.
dealers just gonna have to take a L. Like, hey, find a different career. Let's stop poisoning our people. And I know you're gonna say, well, if I don't give it to her, they're gonna buy it from somebody else. But don't let it be you. Just don't let it be you. So I would say, in order for us to start taking care of our own communities and stop pointing fingers at the government for not, quote unquote, doing their job, they have historically showed us that they don't know how to do their job. What did we think that just one day they're gonna wake up and say, you know what, I want to get this right today? Let's be real, people. So I would say the people who in the streets, and I'm using the drug reference just because this is, the thing that the defense tried to use to paint this picture of him. I think they're, oh God, girl, I hope no drug dealers don't come after me, but I just think some drug dealers gonna have to take some L's. Like, just stop doing it. Stop doing it, because there's pharma companies are already trying to kill us with the legal stuff, and then we got the illegal stuff. And then I would say, if there are people willing to set their pride aside and not consider doing things that are hurting our communities and finding other healthier ways to nurture our communities, that's thing one. And then, sadly, we're at the intervention stage, if you will. I think that's an airplane. Hold on. That actually sounds like a helicopter. But I would say, because we're in a situation where, we got people that's already addicted to drugs. So what are we supposed to do? Like, they already addicted, and they living in the community. I think getting access to honest community resources to help people would be thing number two. And validating people's story, like letting them understand that your ACE score is just a number that says you have a story. Your ACE score is just a number that says you have a story. It just means your childhood was a little rocky, right? And it's going to take a little bit to reset your immune system to get you unaddicted to this drug. So I would say communities having honest, real conversations with kids early enough, because that same homeless person or drug addict that you laughing at used to be somebody's child. He ain't wake up no drug addict.
That zip code?
Yeah.
My zip code on that screen right there, I guarantee you would be considered a healthy community environment. I do not want to take away from this situation. It's very serious, and I will never be able to relate.
Yep.
But in a way, as a woman, I can. If my story was to come out, I would be painted as he was, given the issue from someone else.
Yeah, make it seem like, oh, well, yeah, she should have fixed her life, or she should have got her life right. Maybe that wouldn't have happened.
When I was successful and thriving at the top of my game in my whole entire life history, being a mother, whatever, but because of who that person is, then they have to, try to save a little face over here and make, this person look like less than, which is exactly what they did to George. Exactly.
If we know who the real adversary is, our strategy would change.
Yes, just a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, it's a big responsibility.
And the government does have a responsibility in that, or they need to shut down. But it's also community, personal, familial responsibility. It's huge. But it can be done. It will be done.
It can be done.
If not, God will, Jesus will come threshing.
Yeah, right.
For
that prophecy.
He'll take that L, like you said.
Yeah, we got to take the L's. We're going to have to take a couple L's, put our pride aside, because we're going to continue to have George Floyd situations if we don't address the ACEs. Whether it's the system's ACEs, the system got ACEs, and our kids are having ACEs, and then ACEs are coming together with each other, and they just don't know how to get along. And that means that we have to start with mentally healthy adults around kids. That would be, if I had a magic wand and could go wave it throughout communities, I would want for magic dust to fall on the heads of adults, and all of a sudden we've got these mentally healthy adults that can snap out of it so that they could mold the children the way that they need to be molded, right? I'm gonna do one last thing before we go, so stay right there. Me and my teacher demonstration stuff. All right, so here we go. Shamara said, it said multiple times. Chastity Quigley said true to something we said earlier, but my magic dust would fall over neighborhoods, and my magic dust would all of a sudden start healing some of the adults and the adult ACEs that haven't been addressed, or, reparenting the inner child, how you want to work with it, right? Because without healthy adults, we are passing down our antiquated old school belief systems to our kids, and then they having kids and they passing it down to their kids. So that's where the generational cycle comes from, right? And so at some point we got to cut the chain. But I would say with the magic dust being sprinkled on healthy adults, it gives us a clean slate. Like, this is a regular piece of paper, right? Regular piece of paper. If this was our kid starting off with a clean slate, what's happening when they go through these neighborhoods like George Floyd did? George Floyd's neighborhood was neighborhood violence, a lot of killing, third ward. It was right in the middle of the hood before they gentrified it. Mass incarceration, poor schooling, and then racial targeting, in addition to the household ACEs that he had. So what ended up happening to George Floyd, who should have had a clean slate from the day he was born, this is what happened to George Floyd. This paper is still paper. And in order for our kids to be able to undo some of these ACEs, they're still kids. It's just going to have a couple of crinkles in it. It can be undone, it can be fixed, but it won't be easy. This paper will always be paper, but it will never be as straight as it was before I just crinkled it up, right? It's going to take some ironing out, some people taking some L, some people starting to question, like, why do I turn to this substance when I am stressed? What is the source of me doing that? Can I start to normalize the fact that everything that happened to me was not okay, but I can't change the past, but I am in charge of what's in front of me. Let me call somebody and get help. That's obviously where we come in as the middleman with ACEs Matter. Like, we want to make sure we can channel you to that help that you need, but don't just sit there and keep crumbling yourself up till the paper starts to tear itself apart. This shouldn't have happened to George Floyd. You know, he never got to get the crinkles out. He never got to get the crinkles out.
Cindy?
He never got to get the crinkles out.
Specifically for, apologize for not knowing how to word this, specifically for the Black community.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to cry. His childhood trauma led to death by trauma.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And what did that, and it wasn't just, this happens every day, right? People die, there's suicide, we're all dying. We have 20-year less life expectancy, which alone is scary enough when you're sitting at a solid 9 or 10 ACEs, right?
Yeah.
But having that televised, that in itself invoked another trauma.
Another trauma.
To who? To the Black community.
Yeah.
Am I wrong in saying that?
Nope.
It ensued fear. It said, and it breaks my heart. I don't care how healthy your family is, there's an oppressor somewhere. Your mama didn't want you to have those drugs. Your mama didn't want to have those drugs. Your kids didn't need to see that happen. Where's the oppressor? Because you can be mentally healthy walking through life, but if you're being oppressed over here and over there, or you're being isolated or segregated or demeaned or belittled, or, I've told you this many times when we talked, it's not just at home, it's community, it's within our government, the way we're treated, it's globally. And some people just would do that to George Floyd just because his light shined better and it pissed them off.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
thank you. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm glad. Thank you for sharing your truth. Watch this. Hold on. Those of y'all that tuned in, thank you. I'm about to go out here on a limb and say, you got somebody on your timeline that may be dealing with stress, may be dealing with their own unresolved trauma. They may not even know that their ACEs might be contributing to what's happening with their health, what's happening with their relationship, what's happening with their kids. And because of that, we need healthy adults in every single zip code. Healthy communities will help us level the playing field so that people like the system that tried to use George Floyd's addiction problem to validate why he was treated like an animal will not have a leg up on us. And we need people who have made it, people who are trying to figure it out. If you are looking for a way to give back to your community, Marcy and I are looking for zip code heroes. We are looking for people that are willing to help embrace the ACE. These ACEs are the common denominator of everything that we are seeing that is leading up to poor choices, that is leading up to drug abuse, that is leading up to depression. And if there's a parent that you see that uses corporal punishment or just ass beating, for lack of a better word, or yelling at their kids, if there's a parent that you see that is constantly doing that to a kid, you can start counting that kid's aces up right now, because that kid, unfortunately, will grow up and not be able to handle stress just like George Floyd did. And we are not the enemy. We are not trying to point fingers at the parent, but obviously that parent may not have a healthy enough mind themselves to be able to give their children what they need at an early age. And that's why we need people like healthy adults to help us embrace the ACE. And I think I would say Marcy would add to this, like, we need zip code heroes. We need people in the communities. We need somebody shining in every single zip code to get the word out about ACEs, because there are some ACEs that we can nip right in the bud with the right person who's willing to go out on a limb, be bold enough to talk about them, and say, hey, I want these kids to have a better chance than I did. We ain't judging nobody. We ain't trying to say that somebody's less than. If our mentality is really about keeping kids from having to rely on a substance to have their needs met, then we need people that are going to help us intervene and have this conversation boldly so that our kids have a better chance. I don't know. Marcy, would you add anything else to that? I'm at the point, like, we can't do this by ourselves, right? You
We
and I
can't
are
do this
sitting,
by ourselves.
we sitting 10 aces strong, right? And we still working on ourselves. We sitting 10 aces strong, but like you said, it can be fixed, but it's taken us still a while to even get where we could have been had we not had any aces. So,
But also knowing that it will forever be with us. You know,
yeah, they'll forever be with us. That's right.
Mhm.
It's part of our story.
It will be, and every day won't be as hard, but it will always be, there will be a constant reminder. And I think we're doing pretty good. But like you said, if anything, it's not about blaming or judging or less than, like you said, it's simply about understanding. So we see where we are right now. Our kids, it's just going to be worse if people don't start, and we're two people that you can just sit and have a conversation with, start it there, it doesn't have to be.
I'm like, push away from the TV for a hot minute. Stop being desensitized by what we see on the media, and ask how you can actually get out and help somebody in the community just by using your voice or using your timeline, right?
Love,
you cannot keep running away from
another.
it. That's it. That's it. That's it. That's it. That's it. This
Love
is the adversary. The adversary says it a million times. The adversary, the adversary, the adversary. Adverse childhood experience. The adversary loves adverse childhood experiences. Why does the adversary love adverse childhood experiences? Because adverse childhood experiences bring children closer to that thing, that evil spirit thing called the adversary. So the more aces, and especially when they don't get treated, the closer these people get to the adversary. Are you with me? The adversary loves this. And when I say the adversary, Satan, the evil spirit, whatever you want to call them, the more aces a kid has, the adversary loves that, because I'm messing with your mind. I'm messing with your mind. I'm taking away all your hope. I'm making you turn again. I'm taking away all your hope. You turning against people, all that. Let's stop helping the adversary. Let's make the adversary work a little bit harder to take our minds from us. And I'm going to end on that, Marcy.
I think you did a great job.
George Floyd, aces and taxes, right? I said George Floyd's aces, taxes, and death. We were born into believing that there were two things guaranteed in life, and that was taxes and death, right? If you get a job, you're probably going to have to pay taxes, and everybody has an end date. But now we know one in 6 people, one out of every, is it one out of every 6 has one, at least one ace? I want to get that right. Anyhow, aces,
7 out of 10.
7 out of
7 out of
10
10 have at
have at
least one
least
ace.
one. So depending on where you grow up, it's not just going to be taxes and death that are guaranteed for you. It's going to be aces, taxes, and death. Aces, taxes, and death, and likely in that order: being born into aces, getting a job, having to pay taxes, and then unfortunately, all of us are going to have to die at some point. But that's what we're here for. Thank you, Marcy. I just wanted to get on here and do some randomness because George Floyd verdict is what we needed to hear. But that's only one step. We can't rest on that.
No. Love you, Cindy. Thank you for what you do.
See you Thursday. Thursday
All right.
Night Live for a real show. Bye.